Good morning. I'm sorry. Nothing's funny here to the guys. I'm in a good mood. I spent all day, I started off on the day to do our, boycott all these people. And I
Mm-hmm.
spent that whole boycotting day out in my yard digging and working. And my nature is to dig and work and play with dirt and stuff. And so one day wasn't enough. I spent the second day, and now I'm just overjoyed at the notion of after this, I get to go spend day 3 doing that. So this is Happy Bob welcoming you. I'm Bob Brown from BQ Press, welcoming you to the BQ Sunday brunch where Karen is off on a cruise, bless her heart, but we have Phyllis Irene Radford is here with us, along with Brenda Clough and her collection of yarn. And they have their special guest this weekend, Mindy Klasky. Now, I'm going to let all you guys do the introductions, and I'm just going to say, be happy, be resistant, don't go silently into this darkness, guys. Keep fighting and stop the coup any way you can. And that said, Phyl, Brenda, Mitzi, you guys are Mindy. I'm so sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Hit him over the head often enough and he will get it.
It's the dog, Mindy. It's his dog.
Yeah.
And then there's that whole issue of typos. The I just slides over typos.
Oh, good morning, all again. And my old friend Mindy Klasky is here to talk about transitioning from traditional to independent, transitioning from being a lawyer to being a writer, and anything else that occurs to us. And what's up, Mindy? What's your newest projects?
I have a lot of different projects going on right now. As you know, I write in a number of different genres. And I am continuing to look at ways to expand my magical Washington universe, ways to continue writing contemporary romance. But I've spent a fair amount of time over the past year writing under a super secret pen name, where I am writing very, very narrowly. I'm not allowing myself to go off on any of my tangents. And I'm writing dark romance, dark mafia romance. And it's sort of silly to talk about it here because I'm not disclosing what the pen name is. But that has taken a huge amount of my time and effort to read this new genre, to explore what the tropes are, to figure out how to, actually harness what readers want to read in that genre, and to bring it to them.
You're going to tell more details, right? Because I have never heard of dark romance.
I can definitely share more about what the books are and how they work. Dark romance is one of the hottest subgenres of romance right now.
Really?
It has morally gray heroes. Heroes who may be doing horrible things in the real world, but they are true to their love interest in these romances. Mine are Irish mob heroes. All of the heroes are involved with the mob in some way. The heroines are all very strong-willed and very independent. These books are extremely spicy. In romance, we go on a spectrum from sweet to spicy, and these are off the charts on the spicy end. Books are primarily read by women in their 20s and 30s. They are primarily read through Amazon's Kindle Unlimited program. Mine all involve a tax haven, a billionaire free-port. A free-port, they exist in the real world. They're places that are tax-free zones. And I have a free-port, a made-up free-port that exists in the state of Delaware. and all of my billionaires come there to do their nefarious business deeds and to meet the women that they love. And with those details of a Delaware tax-free port, billionaires, and Irish mob, the researchers among you can probably figure out who I am.
Why Delaware? I know you live on the East Coast, but
Delaware, because it has there is no income tax in Delaware, and it is extremely friendly to corporations. And so in the real world, those corporate aspects make it the most likely state in the U.S. that would have a free port. In the world, the largest free port is in Geneva, Switzerland.
Right. And there's a considerable benefit to A, not traveling out of the United States, and B, from your point of view, you could just drive there and like scope out landscape. You don't have to fly to Geneva, Switzerland.
Geneva is, because of Switzerland's neutrality, is the base of the largest real world free port. For me, I wanted easy access to New York and to Boston and Philadelphia and DC, which is where my heroes all live.
And there's always the, you can ride the train now. You don't even have to get onto an airplane and risk your life, pancaking on the tarmac. So there's a lot to be said for keeping it in where you can work with it.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's, kind of heavy for you. I'm used to things like Girl's Guide to Witchcraft, and that's that series.
In a lot of ways, you are right. The new pen name and those books are much heavier than what I've written in the past. However, there's still fantasies in the same, I am taking the real world as I did in Girl's Guide and changing it. I'm saying here's how organized crime works in my world, in the same way that I said, here is how witchcraft and librarians work in our real world. And I had the experience as a real world librarian, but not as a real world witch. To build that sort of fantastic world that integrates into a very real version of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And then I know you also have a legal background, so Fright Court series became natural to you.
That's right. Yeah, Fright Court is a vampire series about a woman who is the clerk of court for the DC Vampire Night Court. And I loved being able to apply, first year of law school, criminal law background to what was going on, with my characters. What happens when a vampire has to deal with land distribution over hundreds of years, that type of thing.
You can't do that thing where you just leave it to yourself in your will. My grandson,
that's right.
Bob Jones the Fifth.
Yeah. So, my mind is half dead this morning.
And you also were doing the ones about baseball.
Yes.
The sports romances.
I do have a series. They're baseball romances. I love it. Three of them are pulled together as Triple Play by Mindy Klasky. Yeah. They are short romances. There's no supernatural element in them. They're built around an imaginary baseball team. See, I like taking the real world and doing slightly imaginary things. My team is set in Raleigh, North Carolina. And there are 9 books in the series, one for each position player on the team. And the pitcher. So all 9. This is especially appropriate now as pitchers and catchers have now reported for the real world baseball seasons. So when I first published them, they came out 1 a month, starting with spring training and going through the World Series. And there's interactions in each book. If you liked the hero of book 1, you're going to see him again in the other books because the team is getting together to play games. And I loved writing that series.
That just sounds like so fun, and it's like got a natural shape, the 9 books and everything. So it just has, and then if you really wanted to, there are other seasons in the game, every year. So you could grind her around again when you felt like going back to it?
There definitely are. And, my husband and I are big baseball fans, and we go to 20 games a season. And when the team our team is the Washington Nationals, and when they're having a good year, I watch the baseball. When they're having a bad year, I plot new books. So hopefully this is going to be such a good baseball year that I won't have time to plot a single book while I'm there.
Yeah. One of the things I enjoyed about that series was that you were also able to tackle not just the romance, but the difficulties it is to be a professional athlete. Not only are they facing injuries, but I remember you had one where this baseball superstar was dyslexic and had never learned to read. He'd always coasted through on his talent, and now he's an adult and he has to grow up.
He has a lot of anger management issues stemming from this sort of alienation from the world that he does need to interact with when he's not at the stadium, when he's not with the team. He gets into a bar fight, and his sentence after the bar fight is he's sentenced to community service. And when he reports for community service, the woman who he is working for discovers that he's not able to read. And she tries to help him with that issue as he is helping her with some of her emotional baggage from a very difficult past. And
hijinks ensue.
That's right.
Yeah. A conversation we've been having over on Bookview Cafe about the new category of cozy fantasy. And I came up with an idea that fits my idea of cozy anything. And it came from bathroom lights, basically, where the overhead blew out. And so we were only getting side light and lesser wattage. And that's what cozy is coming from the side, and it's gentler, and it's just so oozing over the top of hard issues. So
but not getting grody about it.
Right. And they don't, stab you in the eye, but they're there underneath this gentle overlay.
I don't think that I write cozy fantasy.
Brenda, you'd go the spectrum from cozy to horror sometimes.
Well, my idea is that you should have good sharp turns, and the road should go like this, and then there should be a good hairpin turn, and we're going that way. So, no, I don't think of myself as a warm, soft overlay. I think of myself as a roller coaster, and I think Mindy has a better control over on her plots.
Yeah.
I plot my books very heavily before I start to write.
Yes, you see, we're opposites on this, but that is also because that allows you to control it. You can sit there and dial the spicy up and down, and you can calibrate it rather than just the characters leaping into bed and what do you mean? You have a Saint Bernard. Honestly.
In a well-written romance, any of the love scenes has a purpose. It is showing character development. It is showing the challenges that the characters face. And so for me to just say, oh, I don't know what else to write, so let's put them in bed, doesn't make it an effective romance. There need to be issues that arise in the early scenes that need to be resolved later. And I am not talking about physical issues, but the emotional ones that the characters need to learn and grow and to support each other.
Yes.
That is actually one of the things about romance is that it's gotten to be a very, very interesting and complex genre. There's a lot, under the hood, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think that most readers don't realize how all the bits come together. It's quite difficult.
I think of a well-written romance as a well-written classic film. that there are certain elements that need to be there in the plot that readers are expecting. If you go to a horror movie, you expect to see certain things, and you're going to be disappointed if your horror movie doesn't have any of those elements. But when it can show it to you in a new way, when you can have your eyes opened and see new versions of old stories, that is so rewarding. And that's what romance gets denigrated all the time, because it's by women, it's written by women, it's written for women, it's written about women, and it gets sort of shoved aside. But
there are a lot of formulaic books in the genre. But on the other hand, God only knows there's enough formulaic stuff in fantasy and science fiction.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, the number of, quest fantasies, the number of portal fantasies, very, very large. And that's just, there's a place for that. But that you can take the genre to new places is just the thrill of writing in a genre.
I have a record on my website of tropes that are used in romances, over 100 tropes that are in romances. And I've started to put together something similar for fantasy and science fiction. The chosen one, the rebellion against fascism, all of those storylines that we go back to over and over and over again. And those are sort of the building blocks for the story.
Right.
What you build out of them can look completely different.
Right. It's like Lego. You can do anything with these blocks, but it's very easy just to slide into the, standard rectangular building.
Yeah. Cheryl Alexander in the comments has just said that that's because real romance is rather scattered, messy, and willy-nilly. Ain't that the truth?
Well, it is one of romance. I think this is still true. Mindy will correct me, but romance is the most popular genre of fiction in the United States of America. Of all the fiction sold in the United States, all of it, every other book, 50% is a romance. There are women who will read one romance novel a day.
Yes.
And it has to be a new romance novel. We're not talking about rereading Pride and Prejudice here. A brand new romance every day, 365 days a year. And they're the ones who set up a deal with their Barnes and Noble or something, just to set one of every romance that comes in aside in a bag for Louisa over here. And then she comes in every 2 weeks and lays her money down. And that's the kind of thing that makes a genre really, really a power horse. So it's no wonder that there's one hell of a lot of books out there.
Right.
Because there's gold in them there.
I don't know if it's still true, because it's been a while since I tried to write romances. But the mail order subscriptions were the biggest moneymaker for the romance publishers.
Yeah, that is no longer the case, but it was a model that worked for many, many years, and it's been transformed now into a model like Kobo Plus or Kindle Unlimited, where readers pay a set amount each month, and then they can read as much as they want of the books that are in that program. On Kobo Plus, you can, I think it's $9.99 a month or £9.99, and you can read from thousands and thousands. No, they're not just romances; they're books.
They're everything.
And those programs are growing in popularity, both with authors and with readers. Amazon has one as well. Amazon requires authors to be exclusive to it. And so if you publish in Amazon's Kindle Unlimited, you can't sell your book elsewhere. Kobo is fantastic in that they are non-exclusive. So readers get the benefit of that. Authors get the benefit of readers finding them, and authors can still sell their books elsewhere.
And it is in an era where maybe you don't want to go out and pick up the book from the store or the library, we're locked down, there's weather or transit issues, then it's nice to be able to get your fix every day.
Yeah.
And I find that more and more of my public libraries offerings include romance in a way that they never did 10 years ago. They would have a handful, Nora Roberts and Danielle
Right.
Steele and some of the
Georgette
huge
Heyer.
blockbusters. But now it's quite common to find everyday romance authors that libraries are acquiring.
Well, that's another thing that helps with the electronic distribution of the books,
Right.
because the library doesn't have to build a new wing on to hold another 20,000 paper books.
That's right.
They can just
have
run
to
it
find the
around
budget.
electronically. It's a breeze. And
They just have to find the budget to acquire them, which is something of a challenge. But
it is, but it's cheaper than the brick and mortar. It really
That's
is.
true.
And
That's
it
true.
is, and it's also much more flexible. If God forfend romance became no longer fashionable, then it's easy to deaccession. You're not sitting there drowning in all these books. You've been down to the DC Public Library,
Yes.
down at Martin Luther King, and they deaccessioned so many books about 10 years ago because they still had those things taped into the front where you could stamp it, and you could see that a given book had not been checked out since 1979. And I had actually found a book. I was the first person to check it out, and I thought, I could steal this book. I could keep it and never give it back deliberately, because I know they will deaccession it. No one was going to read it again after I read it. I gave that serious thought, but then I thought, then I'd have to keep it forever, wouldn't I? And so I didn't. I was good.
Yes. Good for you for not stealing from libraries. Nobody here is recommending any theft from any library.
No.
Yeah.
But they've no longer doing fines, so you can essentially steal it.
I remember in Portland, and Brenda's just a block or so from the public library. But,
Yes.
This was maybe 15 years or so ago, and they had to do some major structural renovation, as well as things like plumbing and electrical cables and whatnot. And to get to the infrastructure to fix it, they literally had to empty rooms of this vast, magnificent marble building. And granted, they did move their headquarters to a smaller building, but they had to get rid of just rooms and rooms and rooms of books. And what they found was that, yes, when a bestseller hits the bookstores, they buy 20 copies to keep up with the waiting list.
Right.
But then after the initial surge, they only needed one copy, but they still had 19 extras.
Yeah, all those copies of The Source by James Missioner, or, you don't need 20 of them today. And they recently renovated that same building again, mainly to upgrade the bathrooms and the internet, which you cannot argue with. But they closed it for 2 years because a historical building, and when you're doing plumbing, there's sort of nowhere to go. And I discovered thrillingly down there that there's all the stacks in the upstairs that you can wander around and pull books off the shelves. But in the basement, there's another whole set of shelves where only the librarians go. Everything's listed in the catalog as available. But when you go there and you say, give me Marie Corelli's novel that came out in 1869, there is a copy, but it's down in the basement. And I envision the librarians down there in long white gowns, going up and down and saying, alas, alas, she demanded Marie Corelli. It was just so great. But I'm never going to be able to get down there. I don't think I can talk my way in.
They closed the stacks ages ago.
Yes. I think there were difficulties, with people going downstairs and eating hamburgers or whatever,
And there was at least one case of a colony of homeless people who were camping out in the basement.
Yep. And it is
running their little sterno camp stoves, which
and it is, you have to control your space, and that doesn't do the books any good for people to be dining down there. So it is, they've been very good about that, and the building is magnificent. The collection is to die for. But a lot of their power now is in electronic. If you look at the catalog of libraries now, they've got a lot of electronic stuff. And it's easier for them to manipulate and handle, and it's easier in many ways for writers, because that makes self-publishing easier. You can really get some major access. But I wanted to ask Mindy about how you can, how do you decide how spicy romances are? There's a scale, and there's a hot pepper scale. I forget what it is, but it's very popular in New Mexico, where you can just say these peppers are a 7.
The Scoville scale.
Yes, and I think it goes up to some fantabulous number where don't wear a hat when you eat this, because you're going to need to emit the heat off the top of your skull.
Well, it's interesting because one person's bell pepper is another person's ghost pepper, and trying to explain. Years and years ago, Harlequin used to have lists of what words were acceptable in their books.
Really?
And they had them broken out. These nouns, these verbs, these
adjectives.
Adjectives they were more willing to go, except you can't use the word moist. But they were very, very strict, and you knew when you picked up a Harlequin that you were not going to be confronting either certain words or certain acts that just were not going to appear. In the world of independent publishing, those sorts of rules are well out the window, and they are at Harlequin too now. But it's one of the reasons why I went with the pen name for this new series, because Mindy Klasky readers are not expecting to go to an underground sex club in Brooklyn and to see what's going on. Now, the pen name readers are looking forward to that, and each series gets back to that club and gets back to the very high heat levels that are there. It's interesting to me as Mindy, not as the pen name, where I've had long-running series that have been written over an extended period of time, to see the difference in spice or romantic attachment even as the series grows.
Is it evolving, or is it just you going around and opening different corners and pulling out different pieces of yarn to see if they knit up nice?
To me, it has all evolved naturally over the course of the series. In my Glasswrite series, in the first volume, the heroine is 13 years old. There's no spice in that book. There's very little. By the
time she turns 17, hopefully there's a little bit of.
There's a little, as she turns 17, she's 22 by the end of the series. And she has fallen in love. She's fallen in love, had her heart broken, and fallen in love again. And all of that is, I think, an accurate reflection of the character's age. In my Girl's Guide series, which starts out with the heroine as she's a young adult. I mean, there's no reason that she can't have a romantic relationship. But
she's a college grad in library science.
That's right.
Yeah. We know she's at least 21.
She is she has a graduate degree in everything, but she has immature ideas about what a good relationship is. She has a crush on a professor who comes to the library, and she tries to make herself into the person that professor is going to fall in love with. And it's not a spoiler that doesn't work very well for her. But as the series goes on, she learns how to interact for real with a reasonable love interest who is her match in every way. And
because so you made him that way. Yes.
But there is that transition as the series goes on. And so readers who read the first book where it's all fun and frolic, things are a little more serious by the last book in the series, or the currently last book in the series.
Good. I'm glad.
But you can't have the character stuck in the same thing. If she spends 13 volumes selecting an inappropriate person, and by the end of the book it all burns and crashes in flames, then after somewhere along about book 5 or 6, you have to say, honey, this is a pathology. It is no longer
That's right.
convincing that you're doing this in a real way without having either so little self-awareness or you have a slight mental illness. Have you considered help?
Exactly.
And so it either has to evolve into some more productive direction, or if it stays there, it becomes weird.
But I do think that there is still a pact that I have with the readers. If I've started a book with this sort of lighthearted, mistaken romance, I can't all of a sudden turn it into Letters to Penthouse.
And it can't suddenly become vampire horror, or she cannot suddenly become James Bond or anything like that.
Right. I can write other series where those may happen. And as Mindy, I certainly have not held back from writing different subgenres, different series.
I think that is such a great thing to be able to do, because if you're not the kind of like certain Harlequin writers where they can just sit down and write 42 Harlequin romances, never using the word moist, perfect, and if you can do that and you can just keep on, that's how you really build a following. When everyone knows that a Barbara Cartland novel is going to be exactly what that previous Barbara Cartland novel is, there will never be a organ described,
Right. Yes. And somebody figure out that, didn't somebody at one point write a column about the 100 different ways to describe the male appendage without actually using anatomically correct words?
I like eggplant myself.
There are all sorts of euphemisms, and it's the trend in contemporary romance not to go with any of them. You choose a word that is a typical slang word and you just use it. That's the way most of us now think, instead of shying away from the euphemisms. But there are still some words that are not commonly used. I have a series that I wrote during COVID. They're contemporary romances. They are set in and around DC. And in a way, COVID plays the bad guy, because in each case, these couples are meeting at a time when they aren't able to be in the same physical space. And my brilliant idea was to call the first one the C word, the COVID word.
But everyone was thrilled and excited.
Yes. The second book was called the F word. There's a fox that is very prominent in it. There are friends that are in it. And the third one was the B word. Amazon wouldn't let me advertise the books with those titles, and I ended up retitling all three of them. But this trying to be coy around language backfired in a huge way for me.
Annoying. We actually have a copy of the F word around here someplace. My husband acquired it, I think, on hopes that the title would really be. He was, but that was during the period when he was researching web pages, and I forget who it was who said to me, "Mindy has a really good author page." So I sent, because all my husband knows of is web pages relating to computer science, and so knew nothing of. But because he could do it, I said, "You're going to design a web page. You're going to make it nice." And he said, "Like nice, like whom?" And I said, "Let's go and look at Mindy's."
Well, thank you very much. It was a challenge to design my page because I do write in these different subgenres.
Yes, and I think that to pick a sort of overarching Mindiness into which all these different gem-like things can be set is harder than if you're just writing 42 Regency bodice rippers set between the years 1811 and 1815.
It is a challenge, and trying to figure out everything from a color coding system to
font,
an appropriate font, an appropriate way. On my website, I've got the first chapters of every one of my books is available for a reader to look at and read before they decide whether to buy the book. Some of those first chapters are quite long. I used to write 5,000 word chapters in the days when I was traditionally published in mass market. And now I write, if it's a 2,000 word chapter, that's long, because a lot of people are reading on their phones and they don't want to need to, tap that many times to get to the next page. But figuring out a web structure that would display all those in a useful way was a challenge.
Did you hire a designer to do this, or did you do it all yourself?
I did it myself.
Oh my God. See, a woman of parts, you can do stuff.
My site is a WordPress site, and it runs on the Divi template. And there are fortunately thousands and thousands of other people who build sites on the Divi template. And so when you have questions and you say, this is absolutely not working, help, there's always somebody out there who knows the answer.
Yes.
Sometimes they know the answer, but they can only speak to you in computerese, and you have to sort of translate it into something that a non-computer expert can apply. But I was able to put up my own store on the site so that I can sell all my own books, so that I get the profit instead of Amazon.
Right. And you never know what's going to happen to these larger marketing entities, whether they're going to become weird or the Russians will take them over or anything. So it's always good to have a toe somewhere else.
One of my challenges is that Mindy's books are, as opposed to the pen name, I do refer to myself in the third person sometimes. My books are all sold wide across a variety of vendors. And figuring out a way to give people links that doesn't just overwhelm them with a list of click here for Amazon US, UK. It's a challenge. It is a challenge in modern web design to get all of that information out there. I worry sometimes that I have shortchanged some of my international readers, because I don't have links for things like Amazon Japan and Brazil, where I have far fewer readers.
Everything. Surely if you live in Brazil, you're used to wrestling with this by now.
Sadly. There should be some way that people can, push a button and say, okay, only show me these links. But that does not easily exist. There are some things that approximate it, but it's not as easy.
Not quite. I remember I forget when it was. It was a couple of years ago where you said a mysterious surge in your sales, and it was linked to some mention on The Guardian UK.
There was a woman who wrote a book that was the same name as one of mine. And it was a book of mine that has not sold well at all.
And
it
then
was sort of
suddenly
a passion project. And somebody used the exact same name, and all of a sudden I started selling 5 or 10 books a day, which was a very large number for a book that had sold 0 books a day for years. And it turned out that this woman had written a book, same name, different subgenre. It was a mystery. There were going to be some very disappointed readers who would finish my book and say, this isn't anything like what The Guardian said it was. Those Guardian reviewers don't know what they're talking about.
Well, you just have to take the money and run and hope it's not one of those things where you can return the book.
That's right. That's right.
But that is just so funny. I remember that.
Yeah. And you cannot copyright a title.
No,
that is correct.
No,
that is correct.
And it is. And in fact, if you are titling your book, it's nice not to name it in such a way that it does create confusion, because if you titled your book Gone with the Wind, the odds are not good that when you throw the name into the search engine that your book will pop up. I think Margaret Mitchell's would come up first.
I believe that is true. I sort of ventured into that realm at one point. I had a series of small town romances that I wanted to name after Frank Sinatra songs. The songs were perfect. I was able to work them into the books that at some point the couple listened to the song. It was a wonderful unifying thing. But if I had a book called Fly Me to the Moon, when people put that into a search engine, they were not going to find my book until they got to the second, third, fourth. So those books all got new. I'm very good at retitling my books. I have learned that over the years.
Yeah.
And when you do, then you just push up a new edition, maybe a new cover, and it'll say on the inside, this was published in 1979 under the title Fly Me to the Moon, or whatever it was.
That's right. That's right.
That is the right way.
Bob and I have just recently discovered that we got rights back on a novel that we co-authored, and we're getting ready to re-release it. If we want to carry any of the reviews over, we can't change the title.
Yeah.
Annoying.
Amazon's policy on that has changed over the years. They've you used to be able to carry over the reviews, and then for a while you were able to carry over the reviews if you emailed them before you put up the new one and you asked them. And now you're right. They're not letting that happen now.
Yeah. And so, well, there were some things we wanted to change so that the previous publisher could not come back and say, give me my portion of royalties.
Right.
But Bob has been wonderful at researching this and has made sure the legal trail leads to us rather than her.
Yep.
It's
so there's I like to say that B Cubed is honest. Bob is honest. But not every small press is.
Right.
And
it's really easy to start a small press. You generate your nice little webpage, call yourself, Nose Hair Press or whatever, and there you are.
Yeah.
In the same way that it's very easy to hang out a shingle as an editor. And there are a lot of editors who worked for traditional publishers who've been downsized through no fault of their own, who have built very strong independent editing businesses. But then there are a whole lot of people who just put a note up there and say, hey, I'm editing books. And
and they're like a sophomore in college in a creative writing program.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, where I sort of fell into editing through doing anthologies for Bookview Cafe. And I've taken, and when Bob came up with his first crazy idea of putting out an anthology in 100 days,
I was suckered into it.
I got suckered into it, but I'd also, I was the only person he knew who had experience editing anthologies.
I think that I'm over on one of the Facebook boards where there are vast, huge numbers of completely new young writers. And a large number of people will say, well, I would like to start an editing business. How do I start? And I have been telling them that I would not hire an editor who could not supply me references.
Right.
If you're starting, if you are Joe Blow and you just declare you are an editor, I will say, well, you'll have to prove it. Just like if you had walked up to me and said, I resurfaced driveways and I see that your driveway needs love. And I would say, well, how many driveways have you done? And are they around here so I can drive over and look at them? Because that's the smart homeowner thing to do. You just don't let any old guy in a truck do your driveway, because that's the way to have a really lousy job done. You at least do some little due diligence. And if you are starting out and you are a sophomore in college and you decide that this is how you're going to fund your education, fine. But if you're going to do that, then the thing to do, I think, is to offer some free edits and then with the understanding that, Phyl, I'm going to give you an edit, but I'm going to use you as a reference. And for the next 10 years, people will be emailing you and saying, well, how did that go with you? With when Brenda edited your book, and you will tell them whatever you're going to tell them. But then that ensures that I do a good job for you. And then you will be a reference forever.
Right.
And there are also a lot of editors who will edit a 5-page section to show how they edit. I have worked as an editor before. I am a merciless editor. And I have made more enemies with my editing than I have friends. But I'm a strong critic, and my editing is definitely not for everybody's taste.
Possibly not for the young and tender writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
The more hardened veteran.
For the very experienced who feel that they do no wrong. The words come from my fingers.
Don't edit me.
Yeah. Bob just commented on the side column that editors should not have mercy.
Well, this is true. But there are, from the author expectation, the number of people on this board who are saying, oh, but she was mean to me. She said that sentence was ungrammatical. I'm
Mhm.
going to have an immediate emotional crisis. And it's like, oh, honey,
Yeah. Yeah.
We have no room for fainting couches.
Well, you're going to get over that, and maybe you want to get over that before, going further on with this. But if you're in that tender a state, maybe don't do this yet.
I'm going to go back to an example that I had with one of my dragon books with Sheila Gilbert at Daw, and I worship Sheila Gilbert and wish she were still at Daw. But she said that something didn't work, and I should just nuke it. And I says, yes, but it's coming from this. And she says, but you didn't show what this is.
Mhm.
You need to go back in and show that so that we don't just get hit with the consequences. We need to see the whole trail. And I think that's about the only time we disagreed. But I'd had enough books under my belt at that point that I could say, yes, but, and get away with it.
I had a couple of different instances where I disagreed with editors. In my very first book, in The Glasswright's Apprentice, it's about a 13-year-old girl who is an apprentice in a stained glass makers guild, and she witnesses a murder, and she's accused of being the killer. And so she has to go undercover in her very caste-bound society to find out who the true killer is. And so in the course of the book, she masquerades through each of the 5 castes of her society. And the editor said, it seems to me that there should be a 6th caste, that there should be a servant caste that is defined differently than the one that I had defined. And I understood the editor's point, and I could have created the society that way. But to take the book and say, okay, now there's a 6th, I would have needed to add chapters so that the character went through that cast and learned something and advanced the plot and grew as a character. And all of that was well beyond what, she had sort of tossed off I think there should be a 6th cast, without thinking through what the effect was on the world building and on the storytelling. And I had another editor once who kept telling me that my romances needed more emotion. And I said to her, okay, let me rewrite the scene. And I rewrote the scene, and it was, so dramatic. And she said, no, it needs more emotion. And I went back and I added adverbs and I added more adjectives, and it was very emotional. And she said, no, and I finally said, can you give me an example of another book that you've edited that has the type of emotion you want? And she handed me another book that she had edited. And it became clear that what she wanted was emotional dialogue. She didn't care about the text that I had on the page, but she wanted my hero and my heroine to speak to each other in a dramatic way. And when I took some of the thoughts that were in their heads and put it into dialogue, then the editor was satisfied. But there was a real vocabulary break between the editor and me as to what emotional meant.
So you just had to get onto the same wavelength and you were fine.
Exactly. And I wrote 6 more books with her. I mean, it ended up being a, perfectly satisfactory relationship. I just understood after that more emotion meant more dialogue.
And that's just where it's important to either talk or think about it. When you get a crit, you just don't immediately collapse onto your fainting couch and hold a handkerchief to your forehead. You have to dialogue back. And so that's a good thing for, young readers to know. I'll keep it in mind and sock it on them the next time.
Okay. Andrew J. Lucas just popped up with, I had a publisher change editors, and the new one asked me to change the tense, the point of view, the theme, and the main character of the story from what was approved and contracted. Only time I have ever refused editorial direction.
I once had a contract with Harlequin. It was a 3-book contract for a series about vampires. They already had my entire witchcraft series, so they knew what a Mindy Klasky book was and how Mindy writes. And when I turned in an outline for the first book, they approved it. They thought it was fantastic. And when I turned in the text of the first book, they said, we want you to change the tense. I didn't have to change the point of view, but they wanted it to be much more about shopping and shoes and makeup. And I am not the author that you go to for shopping and shoes and makeup. And we ultimately agreed to go our separate ways. And I got the rights back to that book, and that became Fright Court. And it was my first self-published book, which I could afford to do because it had been paid for by Harlequin, although they didn't actually publish it. And Andrew, I hope that you have a similarly good resolution with it, because having that rug pulled out from under you can be really disorienting.
Yeah.
I think that when they do that, they're actually suggesting they would like you to go away. It's too much like work to work with you. What you have and what they're looking at there's such a big gap that it'd be easier there are other people who are closer to what they're looking for. So they're just trying to make you say goodbye.
Yeah. Andrew came back with, my story was published with no change.
Very good.
Oh, very good.
Congratulations, Andrew.
Yeah. You just never know with these things.
When I first started taking my writing seriously years ago, the romance editors had a reputation. And I was following the Harlequin American series when it first came out, and they were more adventurous than their more traditional lines. And all of a sudden, they all had the same plot. The location was changed, but we were smuggling jade from Thailand. We were smuggling jade from South America. We were smuggling jade from Greece. And the hero's first name, I think, was Andrew, or
dear.
Something dynamic. And the writers in the Portland Rose City romance writers were scratching their heads. What is going on? They all had the same editor.
Oh, well, so he insisted that the characters all be named Andrew?
Yeah.
It would be all the editors were women.
Right. And we weren't changing Jade to pearls. Everyone was Jade.
Yeah. Can we smuggle Ivory just this once and see what the ethical
that was Ivory's illegal.
It's not like Jade is illegal.
Yeah. So anyway, Bob is coming back on because we are getting up toward the 5-minute mark. Brenda, is there anything you want to pimp in your upcoming projects?
Well, I've finished a book and it's coming out in, I guess it is next month now. Holy God. But maybe next time I'll send you I'll put the cover up and you can see it. I'm not sure I can find it right now, but it is around, and you could always click on my name here in Facebook and it's around. And then the book will come out and we'll run around and do crazy things about it. It is, titled it is about sharks, drugs, and rock and roll. It's a historical set in 1979, historical science fiction too. It is a first contact novel. I love it. Okay.
And if you've read the first 2 books in that series, Cockeyed Optimists, the theme or the continuing element in those books is this island in the South China Sea that kind of changes people.
Well, they're all set in the period after World War II in the latter half of the 20th century. So everything sort of it's fitted fairly tightly into that calendrical period. And it's fun because we were all alive then. We're all the color of our hair shows we were all alive then.
I'll save Mindy for last. But this is my most recent book, Family Bedrock. It came out in October. It was the first new book I'd written in a very long time after a series of health issues and surgeries and whatnot. But anyway, it's in the same world as my Tess Nunquare books, Hounding the Moon, Moon in the Mirror, Fairy Moon, and Forest Moon Rising. This follows after that, but it involves a different family. So and Tess makes a guest appearance. And in about 2 weeks, and I don't have the cover right in front of me, is my next new book, which is called The Barefoot Sheriff. It is Weird West. It is strange. It is different from anything else I have ever written, and I had a ball writing it. So it will be exclusive to Bookview Cafe in ebook starting the 11th.
Exciting.
And then it will go wide on the 31st of March. And what do you have coming up, Mindy, besides your dark romance?
So the dark romance is under the secret name. But this is my most recent as Mindy. This is what the F word became, or the C word became. Katie McIntyre hits a home run. It is a contemporary romance. It is set in Washington, D.C. It is set in 2020, and so COVID does play a role in it.
Baseball?
There is baseball in it. The hero is a professional baseball player who is sort of grounded while COVID is going on. The heroine has a elderly grandmother who she is caring for, who she moves in with for the duration. And I love this book. I love the banter that is in it. I love the love scenes that are in it. This is relatively high on the Scoville scale. And I love the way I was able to use Washington, D.C. in it and to fit in my hometown. And it is the first of 3 interrelated stories. The heroine of the second book is a minor character in this one, and similarly with the third.
I love books like that.
So, Bobby, are you coming back in with any announcements?
He says they're coming back in 3 minutes.
But that
Of course I'm coming back in.
Yes, yay.
Hey, I got to tell you, it's been a grandly wonderful conversation y'all are having. And having edited Andrew Lucas, I sure hope it wasn't me. But
it wasn't you, Bob.
No,
I want
that's
to see Mindy come back when she's being spicy. You could wear sunglasses and a different name. But
here's the thing.
Okay, Andrew came back again, and he says the editor I was working with was exited, so I wasn't.
But Phyl and many of my co-editors have noted over the years that I am not a merciful editor. I tend to have, work
And
with.
Andrew says you are a pleasant editor.
Yeah, but I will tell you, you guys know an author named Kay Hannafin?
Don't know.
In this book right here, Southern Truths,
okay,
she is the lead story in it with a story called They Know. Fundamentally, it's a story that basically says all the crocodile tears you hear from our politicians over school shootings, they know. They know exactly what's going on, and they just don't care. Well, she had the whole conversation dealt with a discussion she's having with Beelzebub on potentials for revenge. I edited that, made some recommendations, and she came back and said, thank you. There's some very good things you've said here, but no, on your biggie about how the interactions go with Beelzebub, no, I like it the way it is. And I mean, it was like one of those, everything else was minor. That was like, you really need to do this to make that story work. So after I got that back, I went and reread her story, and then I sent her a thank you note for saying no. Okay. And I'll say that I joke about it. Writers can stop whining, but I tell you what, writers, when your editor makes a recommendation that you believe is fundamentally wrong, kind of like your your health insurance company denies a claim, speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't speak up, you have only yourself to blame, and the editor, of course, when things go to hell. But if your editor is worth a nickel, that editor is going to listen to your concerns. And they may not agree with them, and they may very well say, hey, maybe we should just part ways because your vision of the story and my vision of the anthology I'm working on are so desperate or far apart that we're never going to find common ground. And just let that be, shake hands, go away. But the bottom line is speak up, because editors are not perfect. Editors are not psychic. And we enjoy making stories even better than the ones than they started. And it really feels good to do that. And it's kind of a rush, but at the same time, it's your story. And
your name on the story.
Yeah, your name on the story. And if it was like there was this one woman, Brenda something or the other, sent a story in, and I said, I really love the characters, the settings, and everything, but if you just did this one, what I considered minor, insignificant little tweak, I heard the shriek vibrating through the internet as she read. It was, so no, just challenge your editor, because your editor is there to challenge you sometimes as a writer, and it should be a two-way level of communication. And that I'll just leave it at that. And again, I'm going to say thank you, Kay, because you made your story. You kept your story as the best story it could be, and a good enough story that when I got done, it opened this book. And I put the best stories, the most powerful story up front, because I want you to read the second one. So thanks. Now, that said, next week we have a guest editor or a guest host, Thaddeus Howes. Normally, you would expect to have Tom Whitmore here, the old WorldCon chair. And I stress, Tom, because you're going on a cruise right now. That's why he can't be here, because he's going to be on a cruise. Same cruise that Karen Anderson's on. And
they're all going on cruises.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a funny thing about being in the Navy. I have no desire to go on a cruise. I have been on a quarter-mile long ship with 7,000 of my best friends.
And you're done.
I don't want to do it again.
My dad was the same way.
Yeah.
I have to go, Bob. I have places to go and people to be. I'm keeping an eye on my time here. I'll see everybody later on. It's so great to see you even on the Pixel, Mindy.
Great to see everybody here. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a wonderful way to spend an early afternoon.
Yay.
Oh, and by the way, you can, now that the boycott's over, I told everybody on the boycott day, I said, I don't want you out there buying my books.
But today,
you can go buy them now.
Yay. Good idea. People go buy books.
Alternative Liberties. Now, we've only got some like 30 5-star reviews, so you can't trust it. But it's a good book.
I'm going to have to run too. It's been great seeing all of you. Take care.
Thanks for coming on, Mindy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And thank you, ma'am. You were a great guest.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to end the stream